Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez, and this is episode number 610. On this one, Doug and I talk about wrestling. Little known fact, if you have not been listening to the show very long or you just jumped on, when this podcast initially started, it was about professional wrestling, more particularly WWE at the time, and then it evolved into some of the other companies, and especially some of my adventures on the independent scene. Yes, I used to be an independent wrestler, for better or worse. I was nobody. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say I was the greatest in the world. Absolutely not. I learned a lot. I was very, very green, and I got into the business by helping out with the ring crew. So I learned a lot of things. I met a lot of people and had a lot of good times. And we talk about some of those in this episode, as we also talk about how somebody like me, who has fallen out of my routine of watching professional wrestling, because it was a thing week to week, how to keep up with some of the different news. And Doug even recommends a bunch of different podcasts, not just wrestling, but other ones as well, to try to keep up with one. One was Behind the Bastards, I believe Doug said. That was covering, it was a 6-part episode on Vince McMahon. So I'm going to check that one out. So I definitely want to mention that one to everybody else to see if they like it, enjoy it, and hell, report back. Let me know what you think. Yeah, that's about it. We're just going to do the usual plugs. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com. Nobody over there has yelled at me yet for, reviving the show and putting it back on there. So hopefully we can continue. Little great partnership we got there. I do my thing. They're okay with it. Fine. Sure. No problem. You can also check us out on Rabblecast.libsyn.com. Check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast and email us for rabblecast@gmail.com. I appreciate the emails we have gotten so far. Like I said, being able to do this again is fun. It's exciting. It's actually kind of a chill moment to just be able to sit down and record and catch up with Doug again. So yeah, we're having fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. I can't think of anything else. I don't know if I have any corrections from last week. If I do, email me. Let me know. Otherwise, I have to get to editing. So yeah, the show that you're about to listen to, I'm going to go work on. So in the meantime, I'll do that. You enjoy the show.
That was 10 seconds.
Yes, it was. And I don't know why, but every time when I hit the record button, I try to remind myself subconsciously, take a deep breath, because you want to make sure that you can breathe normally, or you need to relax while that few seconds to remove background noise. This is a little behind the scenes. And each time when I hit 7 seconds, I'm like, oh God, I have to take a breath. And I'm afraid it's going to come like one of those like really nasally breaths. And I just don't want to, I just don't want to make it obnoxious for anybody listening.
Well, do you have one of those foam fingers on your microphone?
I have one of those little, yes, I don't remember what kind of filter it's called, but yes, the little foam piece that goes over the microphone. And Jen was nice enough a few years back to buy me one of those P filters, or pop filters, where it's a little, that's like almost like a thin material stretched over a circle, so that when you say words with P's in them, you don't have that plosive that shows up on the audio waveform.
Yeah, I'm totally familiar with those things. Yeah.
The other trick would be to like hang a pencil in front of me, or put your finger, where the divot in your upper lip is.
Yeah.
Put your finger in front of your mouth, like you're going to shush somebody.
Yeah.
And either that or a pencil in front of your mouth apparently pushes the air. Let me see if I can just write. It pushes the air, separates it so that you don't have that peak when you record. A lot of voice actors do that to try to avoid creating a pop, or getting a distortion in the sound.
You put your... Weird. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm doing it right now.
So if in front of me right now, if I were to say pizza, I have my finger in front of my mouth. Pizza. Now, if it's out of the way, pizza. That's going to create a higher waveform. And when these guys are acting, especially for characters, if they say it loud enough, it'll just throw the levels all off and like, wait, cut, do it again. So.
No, when you just said it just now, I can hear it kind of sounded a little softer.
Yeah, that's all it takes. That little bit. And, I mean, there was a video of John DiMaggio from Futurama.
Yeah.
You'll see him do it every now and then when they do behind the scenes of him. And he'll put a pencil or his finger in front of his mouth real quick just to make, because they know they're going to have a lot of P's in the sentence. So they want to try to mitigate as much as possible. So little tricks that I've learned here and there as I've researched a whole bunch of the industry to hopefully get in one day.
Gotcha.
So, but I'm not going to do the same thing to you as last week, because I realize as you and I are now separate as far as when we're recording, yes, the button has been hit, and yes, this is on digital, on reel, whatever you want to call it. It's being laid down.
Well, it only took me 2 times before I was like, okay, I got to make sure and clarify when the when you start recording, you dirty son of a bitch.
There you go. There you're getting it. How the hell you been?
Ups and downs, ins and outs. It's been a very odd week. I don't know. Life is life right now. I'm anxious, tense, apprehensive, full of dread. Yeah, about normal. Any
particular reason?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
It's a day that ends in Y.
Okay. Yeah, this week's been a little torturous at work today. It's amazing how frustrating a job can be when there's little to nothing to do.
Yeah, time draws out like a blade.
Yeah, and management decides that they want to try to make it more difficult. So it's just, I don't know. It got to the point where I actually brushed off the resume, and I was like, you know what? Just in case, let's start a small search, just to be safe. Because if it doesn't pick up anytime soon, I don't mind getting paid to show up and do, next to nothing really, because all the stuff that I would normally do is menial anyway. But I would like to get a little bit more challenged, so I was able to find a few places that I could drop an email or two here and there and see what's going on, and maybe I'll hear back in about a week or so.
You want to come to Pennsylvania?
If it wasn't that long of a drive, I definitely would consider it, to be honest, because there's a lot of people that I talk to say, hey, there's jobs out in PA, you should go check them out. And I'm like, you know what? Really, the only difference, the only thing that really kept me close to home recently, and I was talking to Jen about this, was that, the kids were younger, so in case of emergency, to try to rush home from a job, want to try to mitigate that, or just at the very least take that into consideration. But now the boys are getting a little bit older, so maybe it probably wouldn't be such a bad idea. I just don't want to get stuck with like that hour and a half commute a lot of people talk about. Like, oh man.
Oh, it's longer than that.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, from where I work to where you are, I reckon that's probably an hour 20 without traffic. You strap traffic on top of that, and it's very bad around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's probably going to be closer to an hour 45, I'd say.
Yeah, so I try to keep it relatively close when I find work, and if I have to, I'll always take into consideration traffic or any other nonsense. I remember one job that I had for a while. It was in the month of November, about 4 or 5 years ago, where there was this crazy snowstorm that everybody knew the storm was coming, but they didn't expect it to be as bad as it was. And what normally would have taken me about a 45-minute drive with traffic to get home ended up taking me close to 5 hours because the snow was just everywhere.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was about a week or two before Thanksgiving in 2018. It was just a freak storm that came up. Nobody was ready for it, and let's be honest, no matter where you are, even in the northeastern United States, people just seem to be utterly flabbergasted when it comes to driving in snow, so it just turns into a complete fucking shit show.
Yeah, it was not nice. I remember I had a smaller hatchback at the time, and what I started doing was, because as I'm driving home on one of the main highways, trucks were being stuck in the snow, other cars like off to the side, because I guess they just hit a snowdrift and just went off to one side, whatever the case was. But as soon as I saw a big like semi and it was making tracks in the snow,
Hmm.
I slowly went over to that lane and tried to follow their tracks through the snow, so I didn't have as much resistance getting through all the material. But at that point, it was just trudging through, making sure that you had enough room to stop in case of emergency. It was just ridiculous. I don't know how I got home. Thank God for podcasts, because that's what kept me entertained on the drive home. But otherwise, I was like, this fucking sucks. This is a good example why I don't want to be too far from home. And I made sure that the very next job after that was much, much closer. But yeah, like now, like I said, now the kids are getting a little bit older. Maybe you might consider something a little bit further out, especially, after everybody was talking about the great resignation during the pandemic. It's just tough to find a job that's fulfilling and one that's willing to pay you well. Because all the other jobs are like, oh, well, we'll give you an entry-level position. I'm like, no. I've been in this industry for a while. I don't need entry-level, thank you. So it gets a little frustrating after a while. But like I said, right now, I'm in a decent position where I can start looking comfortably, just in case. And unless something looks really, really good, I can always just, say no or just move on to the next one, whatever the case is. So we'll see what happens.
You're breaking up on me.
Oh, no. Oh, yeah, that was another thing I wanted to mention to you. Do you move around a lot when you're at home during this call?
No, I lay on my couch. My phone's on my chest.
Okay, weird. I had some like feedback last week that it was just like, thankfully I was able to get most of it out, but I was like, this is another pitfall of trying to do this over the phone, unfortunately. We're reliant on whatever
Yeah, you just broke up pretty bad.
No. We can remedy that by me just giving you a quick call right back, hopefully.
Yeah, we'll give it a shot.
All right, let's give that right now. Stand by.
Okay, we're back.
We're back. I've been here the entire time. How's that sound? A little bit better?
A little bit better. It was very weird. It was just like it would kind of drop in and out where I'd lose like maybe every second or third word.
Yeah.
But then would pop back in. So it was just like a little hinky. And given the fact that neither of us are moving, it doesn't make sense. So, but hopefully it was just like a one-off and now we're good to go. So, yep.
Alrighty. I'm actually just trying to fire up my tablet real fast to go over some stuff.
Are you recording?
I guess.
Okay. No, actually, the funny thing is, I do remember that freak snowstorm. My normal commute at that point in time was maybe 15 minutes or so, just taking like side roads and avoiding highways.
Okay.
And I think that day it took me like an hour and a half to get home, which at one point I just realized I was like, bloody fuck, I could have walked home faster. So.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. That whole night was so weird.
Yeah, that was the era of the legendary Lehigh Valley Camel.
The what?
So I remember some folks I knew who were out this way at the time, somewhere in traffic because it was really bad. Like everything was backed up all over the place, all over the area. And apparently somebody was transporting a camel that day and they got stuck in the snow. And it went so bad that they just kind of opened it up and kind of like let the thing move around a little bit. So people are like, why is there a heavy snow? Because there are camels wandering around on the side of Route 22.
I don't remember hearing about this.
Oh, yeah, it was a thing. If you just put in like Lehigh Valley, yeah, you'll get the pictures. It's fucking wild.
That's crazy. Okay, I'll have to check that out sometime.
Yeah.
All right. My social media is being a pain in the ass at this point. That's fine. We'll move on.
Social media is always a pain in the ass.
This is very true. And I can't get the phone too close to the microphone, otherwise I get interference. So recently I've been covering different previous episodes, the writer's strike that's been going on recently. And now apparently there is the possibility and potential for the Screen Actors Guild to go on strike as well. Have you heard about this?
Yeah, I did hear about that.
Any thoughts on that one?
You know what? If it puts more pressure on the studios to fucking settle this, and okay, I'm usually 99 times out of 100, in fact, 999 times out of 1,000, I'm on the side of labor because I'm never going to be a rich man, but I'm always going to be a working fucking stiff. So my general theory is, yeah, if you're turning in record profits and you're still being a stingy twat about paying your people fairly, yeah, fuck you. I hope they all go on strike, and I hope it costs you lots and lots of fucking money, and then they fucking kick down your door and drag you out of your fucking house in front of your family and kick you in the head 7 or 8 times.
Okay. I didn't know you wanted to
I've
like.
gotten a little bit more severe over the last couple of years with how I feel about certain things in this world, but and I'm already kind of irritated about this because they're already saying this has delayed a bunch of stuff that was coming next year. For example, the big one is this is causing a delay in the final season of Stranger Things.
Yes. Which at this point
So
is
I'm
kind of a little frustrating, especially considering it's the last season to wrap it up so far.
exactly, and I'm like, after the end of season 4, I was like, oh shit, I can't wait to see what happens. So now it's like, well, we might not get it when we're gonna get it, and I'm sure they'll probably figure out once the strike's over. I'm actually surprised. The strike's been going on what, about a month and a half now.
It started at beginning of May, so yeah, about a month and a half we're looking at.
Okay. So I'm of that position right now where knowing that that's like the top tier title for Netflix, I'm sure once the strike's over, hopefully not too much longer, I'm sure they'll throw some money around and try to get some extra resources on that one. But I'm sure that something else will be sacrificed along the way. Be that as it may, yeah, and this is also a time when I do believe like studios are turning in like some record profits as well. So it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's the annoying part about all of this is that during the pandemic we were all stuck at home. So what were you doing? We were watching TV and watching streaming platforms. So
Yep.
with all that going on, people were watching more shows, binge watching seasons, or catching up on old shows, whatever the case was. But I had spoken about it before, where Netflix is notorious for not sharing their ratings.
Hmm.
So you don't know exactly, like they say, Stranger Things is in the top 10 for like a month now, blah, blah, blah. Or it's had an X amount of hours viewed in 24 hours, 48 hours. That's great. It doesn't tell us how many people have watched it. That doesn't give us a good metric. They're trying to be very, very vague while at the same time trying to toot their own horn, which is fantastic, but that doesn't translate into actual data that we can then use to extrapolate just how much money that's being made off of the whole viewing of the show, which then obfuscates the fact that writers, actors, directors, all that we can't get a good idea of what they should get paid. But we always hear about these big deals with Netflix, especially when they have like comedian specials. They're like, oh, they paid Dave Chappelle X amount of dollars, or they paid Joe Rogan X amount of dollars to put a comedy special on there. That's great. But even then, when they air it and it continues to run, they don't tell you how well it's done. They just shake your hand like, oh, congratulations on your special. Great. Is everybody loving it? Congratulations on your special. They don't give you anything to go off of, which makes it very, very frustrating. So, yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the side of the labor, because the creators are the ones who put this all together. I mean, yes, Netflix puts it out, or whatever streaming platform, but if you want them to continue to making good content, it'd probably be a good idea to pay them well,
Yep.
especially if you're making X amount of dollars extra during this odd time. So, yeah, it's. I'm actually kind of happy to hear that the Screen Actors Guild actually voted yes on a potential strike, so that when they go
Hmm.
to the negotiating table and they can't get their terms met, then they're willing to go, all right, we're on the picket line along with the rest of the writers. So,
Good. And it's interesting because, yeah, I mean, Netflix, a publicly traded company. Like, I've never looked too deeply into it, so I might be speaking out of a place of ignorance here. But I don't know too much about, you know, how the deals are structured. Like, okay, so a comedian's gonna do a special and Netflix is gonna run it. Does that mean that do they get paid a lump sum? Do they get like a piece of? Depending on how many watches it gets, do they get like a piece of that? Like, I do not know.
I covered a little bit of that one. I was looking into it, and that is pretty much they do get whatever paid up front. What they don't get is any kind of residuals.
Oh, okay. So they get lump sum. Okay.
Yeah. So imagine it this way: on TV, on a network, you would have anywhere between like 20, maybe 25 episodes of a season, if it's fully picked up and the networks for it. You'll get paid whatever you get for that show per episode. And then whenever it airs again on TV or in syndication or repeats, you get a residual off of that. On streaming, already you're working at a handicap because you don't get the full season. You're getting maybe 8, maybe 10 episodes. And I know in the past, you and I have talked about certain Netflix shows, it's like 10 episodes. Like we really could have done that in 8.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So
Daredevil was notorious for that.
exactly. So already you're working with a smaller number, a little bit more than half, or close to at least. And that's one thing. And then when it's up on the streaming platform, yeah, again, you got paid for what the show was created and aired, whatever the case is, but you don't get any money for every subsequent view.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that Netflix, again, does not let us know. How many times something's been viewed over and over again, how many times something has been binge watched, whatever the case is. They just say, oh, it's great, it's top 10. And that doesn't say much. So
No, not at all. On purpose, I think.
exactly. Well, it's a way for them to leverage their end, essentially. They know how well the show is doing. They want to try to keep it going. Obviously, they'll give you more. I guess they'll give you like a pay bump per season or per project, depending on what's going on. But they don't get down to actual numbers. And that's the most frustrating part. So with the writers, I would imagine that's one thing. But especially for the actors, I mean, again, you're going off of whatever they star in or whatever they perform in. You get paid for the initial sign-on, I guess, or whatever you're going to do as far as the actor or the whatever big picture it's going to be. But usually in the theaters, you'll get something on the back end, or you'll get points, whatever the case is. That's the residuals for a screen actor. But for actors on Netflix, if they make a straight-to-Netflix movie, you don't have those same options or, supportive income after the fact. But hopefully Netflix gave you a good enough deal that you really don't have to worry about that. But, that becomes a whole other discussion, unfortunately.
Well, that's been the biggest issue, I think, with the proliferation of streaming as it's been within the last couple of years. Because I can't remember if we talked about it here or somewhere else, but there was that lawsuit between Scarlett Johansson against Disney over them putting the Black Widow movie out on streaming, which means not as many people are going to pay to go see it in theaters, which effectively cuts the knees out from under her compensation for the entire thing, and I think they had to settle the entire affair. Is this ringing a bell?
Yes, we spoke about this. I know I talked about it, when it first happened years ago, but I believe last episode we also spoke about it briefly.
Yeah, and this is kind of a continuation of the thing that's been going on for Christ, probably close to 10 years now, when the WWE network became a thing, and all of a sudden they said, oh, we're going to run our pay-per-views on the WWE network instead of on pay-per-view itself, which at the time, one of the big tricks was everybody always said, oh, make sure, you want to be on as many pay-per-views as possible because you get a bonus pay for each of those based on how well the pay-per-view does. Everybody was always scrambling to try to get on WrestleMania because they know that no matter how crappy the fucking show is, WrestleMania itself is the attraction, so they're going to WrestleMania WrestleMania would attract non-wrestling fans like the Super Bowl attracts non-football fans. But then over the years, people said it's like, well, if less and less people are going to order this through pay-per-view and just watch it on streaming, how is that affecting our compensation? And that was, that became like a giant point. I don't remember where everything went with it. I'm not sure if they restructured or if they're being tight-lipped about it, or if Vince McMahon's just like, well, I'm just going to pay, or I'm just going to fuck the boys again. So who the hell knows?
Yeah, that was one of the big things that you mentioned as far as the pay-per-views, because for the longest time, I remember when, Randy Orton, who's been one of the mainstays for the company for the longest time, he'd gotten used to the structure of what you'd mentioned before, as far as pay-per-views, getting on as many shows as you can, getting on TV as much as you can, whatever the case is. But later on, when they switched over to streaming and the network, it was, everybody was wondering what the hell's going on. Like, how does our pay work now? How does this, do I keep busting my ass to get on every match? Do I take some time off? Does that affect things? Whatever the case was. Yeah, that threw a big monkey wrench into the whole thing. And I don't think they ever really released how the pay scale worked after that. So,
No.
And that also affects, like, in the past they'd been very tight with the purse strings whenever it came to merchandising, toys, video games, anything of that nature. So does that still factor in, or are they still holding back a certain percentage of things? It gets really wonky when you especially when you get into the world of professional wrestling, because they're just carny as fuck all over the place.
Yeah.
So nothing's changed, especially when it comes to pay. I wouldn't be surprised if, like, you had to go around Titan Towers just to collect your paycheck to begin with, like in a shady alley. They don't do direct deposit, and they're like, just come up to the pay window and say a password or whatever the case is.
Then there'll be a guy in a trench coat. You meet him out back. He's going to hand you an envelope full of damp bills, and there's your pay. Yes,
exactly. They tell you not to count it within like 100 feet of the window. You have to, like, leave. By the time you leave, if there's a discrepancy, you can't dispute it, whatever the case is. It reminds me of the days when I used to collect my pay from wrestling.
Well, what's the old saying in wrestling?
What's that?
What? No, this one I just heard a child's voice.
Oh, what the hell is that?
Sorry about that.
Oh, look at that.
Tell me, what were you looking for?
I don't know how the hell we activated Siri on my iPad.
Oh,
It threw me off too.
oh shit.
You were saying, what was the old saying in wrestling?
The old saying in wrestling is the promoters would say, it's like, okay, take all the money we made from the show, put it in a basket, throw it up in the air, and whatever sticks to the ceiling, that's what that's what the boys get paid.
Oh boy.
And it's not just wrestling, it's music too. I was listening to an interview with a guy up in Boston who plays in bands, and also for a while he worked at a bar where he would book bands and occasionally also book wrestling shows. And yeah, there was once upon a time where he counted out the door, and he was like, he went to the promoter and he was like, here's what you made for the night. And he was like, hey, don't tell anybody what the total door was. And he walked away. He was like, huh, that's weird. And it's like, oh, he's probably going to fuck the wrestlers over on pay. Of course he
is. Why? How? It just... I don't get it.
It is the story. It's the story. It's a story as old as the wrestling business. The promoters fuck the wrestlers, and so on and so forth. So,
yeah, I mean, I've seen it happen a few times, and it's never a good scene. You just want to, like, stay as far away from all the commotion as you can. But yeah, when you make a deal with somebody and they come in, especially if they're a bigger name. I mean, granted, what I was getting paid was peanuts compared to what some of these guys were getting to come in through the door. They'll get their hotel paid or whatever, like car service, and somebody will pick them up, whatever the case is. But when they say, all right, and where's my pay? And something gets docked or something is missing. I remember one time they tried taking money out of somebody's pay because they broke one of the folding chairs and it belonged to the building.
Yeah.
And whatever, like, they took it like 4 times the amount like a regular folding chair would cost. And like, what the fuck's this? It just became nonsense. So that was back when the ECW was having the revival, and they were doing a lot of those ECW shows.
Oh, like with like ECW legacy talent all over the place.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, gotcha. I have a pretty good idea of who you're talking about.
Yeah, well, that became a whole other thing. That was one of my favorite stories, actually, when we were in South Jersey. And New Jack was taking on, I believe it was a low-life Louis Ramos. Okay. And we knew what was going to happen. Louis was getting in there, and he knew he was going to have this bout, and he was just going to pretty much, get a few shots in. And then New Jack was going to fucking just destroy him. And New Jack went out to get a chair, couldn't find a folding chair to save his life. So he grabbed a regular chair that was on the floor, throws it into the ring, and the promoter's like, get the chair out of the ring. Get the chair out of the ring. Don't give him the chair. I go to grab it, take it out. New Jack gets up on the second turnbuckle, looks down at me and goes like, what the fuck? I look back at the promoter. Give him the chair. Just give him the chair. Fuck New Jack. Rest in peace. Or whatever.
Yeah, R.I.P. New Jack. Yeah.
Whatever piece he can find at this point. He just. Oh boy. Yeah, that was good times. The only time I actually had to wear latex gloves surrounding a ring because you never know what the fuck was going to happen that night.
Well, it's from all the stories I've heard about New Jack. If he was sober, he was going to be relatively contained and like not on his best behavior, but at least some level of predictability. If he was drunk, anything could happen.
Absolutely. And I'm happy to say, in all the interactions that I've had with him in the past, he was never that unhinged. Excuse me. The only time I saw him unhinged is when we did one of those wrestling roasts for Terry Funk.
Yeah.
And he and Missy Hyatt got into it, and they were having a yelling match back and forth. So at that point, they calmed down, and mostly because Mick Foley and Terry Funk were there, were they able to calm New Jack down. Otherwise, it could have been a very ugly night, and especially since there was a small audience.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody has access to that tape or anything like that, I don't know how much of it actually made to the tape, because I know they cut around a few things, but that became a very uncomfortable moment for a little bit, and it's just like, reminds me why comedy roasts are a great thing for like actors, comedians, people like in Hollywood. Roasts for wrestlers, you're lucky if your friends are still around. You're lucky if you have any kind of money. You're lucky if your health is in good shape. So when you start making jokes about people's careers in life, it just hits on a different level. It's kind of sad.
Oh yeah.
So it just got really, really odd real quick at times.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, you're talking about. It's gotten better, but it's still a pretty fucked up business, especially now that generation has gotten like that much older. So, I mean, but you know, it's still a brutal fucking industry. So,
being that you mentioned that, as far as that generation, how do you feel now watching some of these younger guys, like the kids of going out there, more specifically, like in the case of Rey Mysterio and Dominic Mysterio? How do you feel watching the next generation coming up?
pretty cool. It's interesting because it's the generation now that it's weird because we now have people entering in the wrestling business who probably weren't wrestling fans of WCW because WCW didn't exist when they became wrestling fans.
Very true.
I mean, a lot of people who got it's. I'll take an example of, unfortunately, he's already disgraced himself and pretty much been blackballed out of wrestling for good reasons. But I used to love Velveteen Dream. I saw shades of Rick Rude and Mr. Perfect. All of his stuff in NXT, I absolutely loved. He had just some absolute banger matches. I thought he was great. And I was like, holy crap. And then I looked it up, and when he was having these great matches in like 2017, 2018, 2019, he was blah, 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 doing math is hard. He was like in his early 20s. He was born in 1995.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there thinking, I was like, holy shit. If he's this good now, because the thing I've heard from a lot of wrestlers say that 10 years of working is the magic number for when you really, really get it. But here's a guy who was doing it really well at that point. I was like, man, I can't even imagine where this guy's going to be in 10 years. Of course, then we went out and found out he was a fucking groomer and all types of crazy shit and a fucking pedophile. And he was also recording people pissing at his house, which is also weird. But yeah, at that point they were like, you're done. So I was like, all right, fuck this guy. But
man, okay. I'm sorry.
But
go ahead.
I mean, like, yeah, but you look at some of the other guys, especially like the younger guys you're seeing in AEW, like your Darby Allins or your Jack Perry, which it still weirds me out that that's Luke Perry's son, but it's fucking wild. Or a Sammy Guevara or any of the other ones these are all guys who I don't even think any of them are in their 30s yet. So, yeah, you think about it, these are all people who were born, in the mid 1990s and probably started watching wrestling in like the post Attitude Era. So, but I appreciate that a lot of them have learned from the mistakes of the past. A lot of them don't fuck around with drugs and alcohol. A lot of them take better care of their bodies. A lot of them, the schedules have changed, so it's not as. I've heard stories of some of the guys who wanted to work in AEW because the road schedule isn't as bad as WWE. So I look at that and be like, you know what? If that means that 30 years from now or 40 years from now, these guys aren't like crippled, dead younger than they should be, or dealing with CTE, they're fucking good,
I was watching a compilation of Spike Dudley moments the other day on Instagram.
Okay.
And I don't remember how many times I winced or I cringed at seeing all the amount of like headshots or the amount of times his head rebounded off the mat or the concrete for that matter. And I'm like, wow, man, like that was a different time for wrestling and they just didn't give a shit, especially with the Dudley boys. I mean, they just hit hard with very, very little consideration as to what that was being down the line. But I can imagine Spike Dudley, if he's not already fucked up, in a few years, we'll be dealing with a lot of the consequences for a lot of the head trauma that he sustained. So, yeah, it's weird. Like you said, like the younger, excuse me, the younger generation being able to take care of their bodies better. That's fantastic, especially since they were able to learn from the older generation. But some of the old guard, man, like I don't know what they're gonna do with themselves later in life because the bump card, as Jerry Lynn used to refer to, their bump card has been punched time and time again, so much so that there's nothing left of it. So,
Yep.
It's kind of heartbreaking in certain regards.
Well, I don't know if you've seen the one I think that gets me more than anything else. Have you seen any of the recent pictures of Terry Funk?
No.
He looks like a 78-year-old man who's put his body through hell. Like he looks tired. And there was even some reports where there's days where some days he's more lucid than other days, unfortunately.
See, I wonder if all the stuff that Mick Foley's doing, if he's not trying to like get Terry to do it as well. Because I know we've talked about. Oh, Mick Foley's been trying to do like different therapies, taking nootropics, anything that'll help. I mean, granted, we're talking about head trauma. We don't exactly know the extent of the long-term effects of the injuries or the damage, but Mick Foley's gotten a lot better to the point where he's not as in a brain fog anymore. He's talked about.
Okay.
So I'd like to know what he's doing, and maybe if that could be used with Terry to try to help him out. I mean, granted, the guy is much older, so the body can only accept so much as far as therapy or procedures. But at the very least, if you could take like some vitamins or something, some supplements that'll help him out and just get him to a more comfortable state. Because it's got to be frustrating, not just for him, but especially for family members or friends, where, Mick Foley, especially when he talked about, he goes for a walk, and as soon as he goes out his front door, and then suddenly he's lost somewhere in his neighborhood, he goes, wait, why the fuck did I come out here?
Yeah.
Shit like that. So hopefully, it doesn't surprise me that he looks as bad or well off as you say. But at the same time, it's kind of like all those years, all that, those moments in wrestling, especially all the retirement matches that he's had, finally starting to catch up with him in some regard or another. Because Terry, when he was younger, if you want to talk about his quote unquote prime days, was just a big guy. He's somebody if you took one look at him, you didn't want to mess around with him. But now, unfortunately, when the ravages of time catch up to you, it just fucking does not hold back.
No, and he's the one thing that he does working for him, Terry Funk, that is he actually did get insurance through the Screen Actors Guild when he left wrestling for that short period in the early 80s to go to Hollywood. And he was in Paradise Alley and Over the Top and Roadhouse and a couple other movies like that, which I believe he still has, thankfully. So
if that's the case, then fuck, every wrestler should leave and go to Hollywood for a short stint. I don't know how the insurance works nowadays, but that's amazing, because that's the one thing that a lot of these guys lack is any kind of medical coverage once they're out of the ring.
Yep. And yeah, that's one thing that they should be somebody should basically have a gun to Vince McMahon's head saying, "You're giving your wrestlers insurance. We don't give a fuck if you want to play your weird little games of them being independent contractors. Give them fucking insurance, or we're gonna take that creepy little mustache off your fucking face, there, fella."
The fact that medical coverage for any of the performers, like you said, independent contractor or not, these people are putting their bodies on the line. Yes, for the love of the, I was going to say love of the sport, but it's not really a sport, but for the love of the industry, for the love of the craft of wrestling.
Yeah.
For the fans, and ultimately for whatever infamy or celebrity fandom they can get. That's all fine and good when they're doing it, but yeah, years later on, I mean, fuck, look at I know it's a bad example because he's got money, but Shane McMahon at WrestleMania goes out there older in older age, think he can still move like he's in his 20s and 30s, and all of a sudden, there goes his quad.
Yeah.
I was like, oh,
Like father, like son.
Exactly, it runs in the family.
Yeah.
And it's bad that you and I, as old viewers of the product, knew exactly what it was when it happened. And it's like, oh man, not again. We've seen Triple H, we've seen Vince McMahon going, all for it with a double quad in one night, and then Shane just happens right then and there, and just like, fuck. But once again, all respect to Snoop Dogg, who was able to cover the spot, even though you had to get some prompting from the ref.
And also Snoop Dogg with the line of the entire WrestleMania weekend of where he looks at Shane and just goes, "You all right, Cud?" Seriously, somebody showed that clip to me, and I was laughing my ass off at it because it was just so matter of fact and like kind of relaxed.
The amazing thing about live events like that, especially for WWE, is you never know when something like that can happen. So even when the boring segments come on, like you're gonna want to pay some attention to it because you never know what can happen. And that was a great moment, just watching him go down. Like, oh, you see him come down to the ramp, you see him come down to the ring. You're like, oh my god, it's Shane McMahon. This is fantastic. This would be great. And it's just like a crap throwaway WrestleMania moment, whatever the case is. They'll play it for the highlight reels later in life. But all of a sudden, his quad pops. And you're like, oh, this is a different kind of highlight reel now. Hold on. But, okay, so that's in an example of that. So take Shane's name out of the equation and just have it like a random wrestler who decides they want to come back. They get back in the ring for like a short return stint or comeback, whatever the case is. And they go out there and they're like, oh, I still got this. I can move around. And if you're not in ring shape, or if you're not in any regular kind of shape and you're trying to get back in there and you mess up your shoulder, fuck up your back, pop a knee, whatever the case is, yeah, what are you going to do then? Like, a lot of these guys don't have the medical coverage. They are expected to do it on their own through whatever means that they have. Hopefully they had enough sales through merch or whatever, like online stuff that they do or appearances, that they have something put away. But let's face it, what we live in nowadays, especially this world with the medical industry, it's just, you go to 3 different places for one malady, you're going to get like 3 different prices each place you go. There's never a straight up accounting of how much that's going to cost you, and in the long term, it can get more and more expensive. So,
but that's the problem with it, though. At this point in time, it's medical. Let's not get me started on a tangent about the for-profit medical industry, because that's going to turn into me just ranting and raving for 45 minutes or so. But yeah, and I know they're not terrible. If you get hurt in the ring or something like that, usually they're going to try to take care of you physically like that for a while. But, there's no guarantees in the entire thing. So,
yeah, no, there should be a better, I don't want to say a better system, but definitely it should be a little bit more broad-based as far as how they help their performers. Like you said, in-ring injury, that's one thing. They'll take care of it. They'll help you out. Thankfully, for some of the performers later in life, I call to mind Razor Ramon, Scott Hall, in particular, when they have to go through like rehab or anything like that. They're willing to help out and foot the bill. That's fantastic. But other people, they fall through the cracks, and you're just like, well, what the hell happened? So
Exactly. Yeah.
they'll be listed as like on the roster, like Hall of Fame or past performers, but they just get forgotten after a while. And if you're not one of the big names, it really doesn't make that much of a dent, especially when it comes to reporting on it. When they're like, oh, such and such, wrestled for the company for like 10 years, and then now they're dealing with body pains or body aches and mental issues, and like, oh, whatever, he wasn't one of the big names. It's like that should not happen. Help people out. They
Exactly.
beat the crap out of themselves for you, for your entertainment, and for your ratings. I think WWE can cover quite a few wrestlers as far as medical bills are concerned, but that's never the case.
No, and I mean, like they try in a few areas. I know that they, for wrestlers who are having like drug and alcohol problems, they'll pay for rehab and try to help them out with stuff like that. But yeah, I think it needs to be a little bit more expansive what they're helping their peoples out with.
Absolutely, yeah.
The one person on the flip side I will speak well of for a lot of this stuff is Tony Khan.
Yeah, he definitely is. I mean, granted, if you look at the Tony Khan and the Khan family, I mean, he grew up a big wrestling fan, so he knows a lot of the ins and outs if he followed the scene, and it's kind of refreshing to see how he helps out a little bit more than other organizations have.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, he's still a coked out billionaire smart mark, but I'd still take him over Vince McMahon any day of the week. And one of the big ones that really gets a big pass in my eyes is a lot of the stories I've heard of how he took care of the Huber family after John Huber, aka Brody Lee,
Yeah.
aka Luke Harper, after he passed away in December of 2020. So I've heard a lot of stories about how he really, made sure the family was taken care of well. Basically, he's made sure, like, you're going to get like some type of an income from us for as long as you want it. I believe also like basically talking about it's like for the two kids, basically taking care of their schooling and all that kind of stuff with them, and really, really going above and beyond the call of helping out. So, and that's that kind of thing. Like, it doesn't make you the best person in the world, no, but it definitely gives you points in the right column in my eyes.
And if we can get a lot more of that, that would be fucking amazing. So,
yeah, and also that's one of the other things I think. Like, we haven't had any real competition in the wrestling world since 2000. Let's be honest, 2000, 2001 didn't really count, but about 99, I'd say, was probably around the last time when WCW didn't look like it was tripping all over itself. But now that there's like viable options, yeah, you can tell that it puts a lot of different, gives wrestlers like more leverage where they could say it's like, well, my choices now are not just WWE, Japan, or the Indies. Now it's like, here's this other company I can go work for. So it gives them more options. In fact, yeah, what's his face? I think it was about a year or so ago, Kevin Owens had to renegotiate his contract. All he had to do was go on Twitter and basically put a few things where he just flirted with the idea of going to AEW since he's friends with the Young Bucks.
yeah.
And then, like, not too long later, it came out. It's like, oh, he signed this new contract for like a significant raise. So it's like, you know what? Good for him.
I wonder if there's like a breakdown as far as like the medical coverage or the medical assistance all these different companies will give out to their performers. I know it'd be like off the books kind of thing, but I'm just curious like how each organization handles it. Like Ring of Honor, AEW and WWE we mentioned, Impact Wrestling still kicking out there, and some of the other smaller organizations. I wonder how that all comes about. Does that come out of pocket from the promoter? Is that something that they have like a slush fund to the side just in case? I don't know.
I know a lot of them do have like doctors on payroll that travel with them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been to a number of different shows, and there's always some type of medical professional in the back, whether they're legit or a little on the shady side.
Well,
Somebody's always there with gimmicks, let's say, willing to help out. Yeah, you'll get a back rub, or you'll get like a splint or something bandaged up, or if you need something for the pain, suddenly a bottle appears, and you're like, oh, where did that come from? Just take it. Shh. I don't even want to mention the guy that I saw the one time. Um, Essentially, fuck, I can't. I have to mention his name. Like, there's no other way around it. When Jen and I were both competing on the Indies, and we went down to the shore, we got into the ring for a battle royal, or at least I did. She actually had a match, but she took a stiff ass bump the first time around. It was a brand new ring with the spring in the middle, like the boxing rings.
Okay.
And when it was set up, there was no give whatsoever. The concrete had more give.
Yeesh.
And she just took this nasty back bump, and all of a sudden her brain just got scrambled. And she was able to communicate it to her opponent. They went through the motions. They did whatever they had to do to cover. But when she got to the back, this one guy shows up. I don't even know if he's still active or not. A guy by the name of Doc Diamond.
Okay.
It was explained what happened to her and what was going on. All of a sudden, these gimmicks popped up. She took them. She drank some water, and I ran over real quick because I'm like, "Holy shit, what the hell was going on here?" And I'm like, "Doc, what'd you give her?" And he just puts his finger to his lips and goes, "Shh." Shook his head very gently, very softly back and forth, like, no, don't worry about it, and just walked away. He disappeared. I never saw him ever again. he appeared like, out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden he just disappeared just as quickly as he arrived. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And all I know is that Jen, that night, on the ride home, she was able to relax. We, laid her up in the car a little bit and got her home safely, and she was just calm. So I'm assuming it was some type of like muscle relaxers, I'm guessing. But we never really got the full rundown as far as what it was. It helped her pain. She had a few days after that to recover. But yeah, she really got rattled real quick out of nowhere. And nobody was expecting it. Even when we went in for the Battle Royal, I didn't take one bump after I knew what the ring was like. I was like, nope, I'll just get tossed over. Thank you.
Jeez.
It was not worth it. It's not worth it to put your physical health on the line for a show that you may or may not be coming back for. So,
Absolutely.
Going back to what we were talking about initially with the strike with the writers and the Screen Actors Guild, something that I find really, really interesting. I don't know how it's playing out over at AEW. For WWE, none of their writers are part of the Writers Guild.
Why am I not surprised by this?
Well, it only surprises me because I know that for a while, and we've talked about this in the past, where the writers that are on staff for WWE, for a while, you had your regular writers and producers, which was pretty much the old guard of the talent, helping out with storylines, character development, everything like that. But for a while, WWE started hiring like soap opera writers and TV writers to help out, because they had a different approach and a different background that would be contributing to the WWE product. But come to find out, even if you were a part of the Writers Guild on that end, as far as like TV and movies, that didn't necessarily translate for you to be able to use those skills in WWE. So they took you on with like, oh, this is not a guild job. Like, this is freelancing all the way.
Yeah, and also I've heard stories of the turnover is pretty intense because you have to deal with the McMahons. So
you have to deal with McMahon's. You have to more or less relocate. Well, at the time, you had to relocate to Connecticut, and you had to be willing to travel on a weekly basis. Like every time there's a Monday Night Raw, you were probably backstage helping out or contributing in some shape or form. And even if you weren't, you were expected to be there. So,
yep.
See, who was it? Comedian Tony Hinchcliffe, who's good friends with Joe Rogan, huge wrestling fan, loves it, talks about it all the time. At one point, he was asked to join the writing team for WWE, but that meant he had to give up comedy. As far as going to clubs and touring and everything else, he had to be in Connecticut. He had to follow the product if he wanted to be part of the writing staff. So he's just like, the dream of a lifetime to be able to do this, but I think I'm gonna have to turn it down. And good for him, because he's become one of like the big names in comedy right now. So, but
no, right on.
You had like weigh your options at that point. Do I follow all the performers that I love and grew up watching, or do I just say I'll watch it from the comfort of my hotel room? And in this case, it worked out for him. But yeah, they demand quite a bit. I remember back when the network was launching, they had a bunch of you go to the WWE website and go click on careers, and they had writers positions opened up for a bit, and it was the same thing, like willing to relocate. I can't remember what the pay scale was off the top of my head. I don't think they actually even put it up on the site, but I can imagine just being intensive, writing, rewriting, character development. And then we've talked about it before, how sometimes when they develop a character, it'll run about 6 to 8 months if you're lucky, at least if the performer is lucky. Otherwise, after a while, like kids with toys, they get bored of this toy and then they throw it back in the toy chest and grab another one, and suddenly all that development goes to shit.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Especially when you go from NXT. Whenever they try to transition a guy from NXT over to the main roster, 9 times out of 10 it just never goes well.
Well, at that point, you go from being kind of under the dominion of Triple H to being under the dominion of Vince McMahon, and all of a sudden Triple H, who was like, okay, we're making a super indie here, so I want like the workiest work rate guys possible, which I'm into. And then all of a sudden Vince is like, well, these guys are all they're all 5'8". Like nobody's going to believe he's a wrestler because it's Vince McMahon. He wants roided up monsters.
The term vanilla midget just popped in my head.
I mean, that's exactly it. I mean, how many times? I mean, with the turmoil of everything within the last year, between Vince McMahon leaving the company last summer and then effectively forcing his way back into the company a few months ago. I mean, yeah, it was kind of like everybody was being yo-yoed around, because it's like, okay, if Triple H is in control, it's like, yeah, he's bringing all of his guys back in. So you saw Johnny Gargano come back and a couple of those other guys that they didn't quite know what to do with and they'd released over time. And then all of a sudden, Vince is back in the driver's seat and everyone's got this feeling of, it's like, well, what the fuck do we do now? So, and keep in mind, Vince is not a spring chicken either. I mean, Vince is... if I'm doing the math correctly, Vince will be 78 this year.
That sounds about right. And his birthday's coming up in August.
Yeah, he was born in August of 45. So, yeah, that's 48 or 78 years, if I remember correctly.
Jesus Christ. Well, let me ask you this. You're Vince McMahon. You've built this...
Oh.
Yes. Check the mustache on your lip right now. You built this company. You bought it out from your dad. You're a little unscrupulous as to how you built it, and as far as like taking over different territories, but you built this huge media company. What do you do when it comes time to retire? Like, what do you do afterwards?
You don't retire.
Apparently, yeah. Like
Well, no, because if this is all you've known since, and Vince bought the company in, I think it was 83 or 84. I can't remember which. 83, I want to see, because I think Vince Sr. died in 84. This is all he's lived, slept, and eaten for, 40 years. Almost exactly 40 years. Yeah, he ain't going without it. Vince will drop dead. That's what'll happen.
There was online with the groups that I follow, they were getting upset as far as like how the cons were managing their company as opposed to Vince McMahon. Like, oh man, everybody should be like Vince McMahon. He's on the up and up, and he did it right. I'm thinking to myself, do you know what Vince McMahon did? Like how many agreements he broke, how many territory rules or unwritten rules he broke so that he could build the WWE? There was nothing traditional about the way Vince McMahon ran the company. He fucking ran it roughshod, and he took it with a stranglehold. And I can understand why he doesn't want to relinquish his position in the company, or even just the ability to run the company. But there does come a time where, like, maybe you should take more of a back seat and be open to different ideas. But I guess once you're the mastermind of an industry, it's kind of hard to say, no, I'm good, thanks.
No, and that's exactly it. I mean, actually, I'll throw this down for you and for anyone who listens to this. There's a podcast out there called Behind the Bastards. It's run by a former reporter by the name of Robert Evans, if I remember correctly. And it's basically just, he goes through and he just catalogs and just goes does deep dives into just shitty people, for lack of a better term. A few weeks ago, he did I think it was a 6-part series on Vince McMahon. And at one point in one of the episodes, he even adds a note in where he said, look, originally this was going to be a 3-parter, but yeah, there's just so much material to cover with the story of Vince McMahon. And just, number one, just how crazy he is. And the fact that he's also just an absolutely batshit insane liar, because he's told so many different versions and iterations of his childhood
Yes.
that it's been just insanely contradictory. And that's before he even got anywhere near the wrestling business. But it's a fascinating listen. I think it's about 6 hours. It probably runs it's 6 episodes, probably runs 8 to 10 hours. And they go through everything from his childhood to reconnecting with his father, going to military school, getting involved in the wrestling business, the really weird deal that was structured for him to buy it, where he had to lay out, he had all these structured payments. If he missed a single one, then the entire deal was lost. All kinds of stuff like that. And of course, all the shady shit he did over the years, from the steroid trial all the way up to breaking the different territories and everything else in the entire mix.
What was the name of the show again?
Behind the Bastards.
Okay. I think you just gave me something to listen to this weekend. Yeah, the most that I keep up with the world of professional wrestling is occasionally I'll watch a Botchamania.
Yes.
And that's pretty much it. Like, I really have not devoted much more time. Every now and then something will pop up. What was the one? There was, I think it's called WrestleLamia, was one of the channels that pops up every now and then in the algorithm. I can't remember that.
Oh, yeah, the Brits.
Yeah. And they do some good stuff here and there, and other stuff is just like, all right, just lists and menial things. But, I enjoy it for what it's worth. But I love that we've gotten now to the point where a lot of the retrospectives will spell out a lot more of the information. Dark Side of the Ring, especially like from Vice TV, has been very interesting. I've been meaning to catch up on a bunch of those. But the fact that now we can go back and find out more about the history, about some of the characters, about how this all got fleshed out. Because Vince McMahon, very, very interesting individual in of himself. I remember he used to go door to door as a knives salesman at one point. So like for him, the art of the sale has always been there for him. He's if you want to say he's got the gift of gab, but he definitely has a way of communicating that comes off pretty well. Because I remember growing up listening to him on commentary, and I just thought that that's what he was. He was just a commentator for the company.
Damn.
I didn't realize that he was, the owner, getting out there and just mixing it up with the performers and the announcers and everything else. But when that whole Attitude Era kicked off, and between him and Stone Cold, and it came out, it was more of a prominent thing that, oh, he's the boss. Oh, you get to flip off your boss every week? This is amazing. And that whole storyline just took off. And from there, I think Vince's ego just skyrocketed.
Well, that was also the period when they were also, they went through some, after the boom periods with Hogan in the 80s, they went through some pretty lean times in the early to mid 90s. So all of a sudden, when the entire Austin thing took off, I mean, number one, he had finally started doing what he set out to do in the first place. He was finally kicking Ted Turner's ass. And number two, they were making bucket loads of money. So they were just making money hand over fucking fist. Starting I think it was 98 was when business really, really started turning around and everything started blowing up. So, and then they had the uncanny luck of, you had two once in a generation talents come up within a couple of years of each other in the form of Austin and Rock.
Yeah.
Guys who basically transcended wrestling, and there's not a lot of guys who have done that.
Many have tried. Many have broken their bodies trying to do it.
Exactly, But, the fact that you had Rock and Austin being able to do it, and even in a position where they can both actually reasonably work with each other in that time period and not have it be, a fucking freak show, like Hogan strapping on the tights for the 9,000th time and jumping back into the mix.
He just needs to learn how to give it up, altogether. A lot of the old guard just needs to stop getting in the ring. I think Ric Flair is finally, has had, I guess what you could say, his final match. But I know he still mixes it up every now and then. He'll get involved in certain regards. But sometimes it just gets painful watching some of these guys get out there.
Oh, there were a few people who were speculating that when they had the Ric Flair's last match back, I think it was like last August or September. There were some people thinking it's like it's possible that we're going to see a death because yeah, Ric Flair trying to do a match. In fact, I think he even said after the fact he passed out twice during the match.
Fuck.
But
Wait,
maybe a 70-year-old shouldn't be wrestling in a fucking match, even if it's a tag match where he could hide.
so was it due to any kind of injury that he might have passed out, or was it just his morning and afternoon naps?
I think it was just the physical exertion of the entire thing. So
his blood pressure spiking.
because originally it was supposed to be a solo match, and then they said no, 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 this is a terrible idea. So that's when they turned it into a tag match, so they can at least hide him in the ring. It's like, okay, we'll throw in Jeff Jarrett because the two of you can do some Memphis Gaga together, and then you can have oh bloody hell, I'm trying to think. I think it was Jay Lethal with Jeff Jarrett against Flair and Andrade Cien Almas, his son-in-law together. I think that was the match.
Yeah, I believe
I haven't
right.
thought about that match in months now. But yeah, just by virtue of the fact that they kind of that they threw them in there, it's like, okay, you guys could do the heavy lifting here and let the old men just kind of fuck around.
You've got to love wrestling booking. Oh, let me ask you this.
Okay. Yeah.
So I have not really watched wrestling that often. I have not had the time, nor have I had like the real inclination to catch up on a lot of the different things. Like I said, I'll watch a video here and there or retrospective. Botchamania obviously is just for kicks and for fun, because that's all, it's the blooper reel of wrestling on a weekly basis or monthly basis, depending.
Yep.
What would you recommend as far as somebody for somebody like me to try to catch up? Like, how do you keep up with the product at this point?
Well, here's the thing. Like, I'm a very casual wrestling fan these days. I'll follow some stuff on Twitter. Some friends of mine do wrestling podcasts. So, two friends of mine, Duge and Brett, they do a wrestling podcast called We Need Wrestling. I'll check in with them. I'll listen to their stuff once a week. Another old friend of mine, Joe, he does a wrestling podcast with a friend of his named Adam, and they do one called At Odds with Wrestling, where they go over different stuff. And basically, I'll just get like the week's news, and I'll just tune into that, and I'll just hear them basically say it's like, oh, this was good, or this sucked, or go check this out, or go look into this. On We Need Wrestling, they do something I really like is because they spend about half the show talking about North American wrestling and about half the show covering Japan, since they're both big fans of Japanese wrestling.
Nice.
So they'll, even at the end of their show, they'll say, here's our favorite, each of them will name their favorite North American match, their favorite Japanese match, and then their favorite overall match. So I kind of use all of that kind of stuff as a guideline. If something really crazy happens, they'll definitely be like, when we're getting together, they'll definitely point that out to me and be like, yo, you got to see this, or something like that. So it's just one of those things where it's like I kind of pick at stuff. AEW, one of the things I like about AEW is they don't feel the need to do a pay-per-view every month. They do pay-per-views quarterly. So it feels like much more of a big event, much more of a spectacle, because, and they're hit and miss sometimes. Sometimes they really, really pull everything together nicely. Sometimes they're acting like a bunch of dumbasses. But when you have a bunch of storylines that they've been building for like 2 months or a month and a half, it actually feels like it's something that's more special when they finally pull the trigger on it.
Yep.
So, and also we're coming up on one of their big events they do. It's called Forbidden Door. That one is generally like a lot of crossover matches with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And the announced main event of the thing is going to be Kazuchika Okada, arguably the best wrestling talent of a generation in Japan, versus Bryan Danielson, the best wrestler of a generation in the United States, are going to have a solo match. So, and I don't expect it to be the craziest thing that ever happened. I mean, Bryan Danielson at this point is, I think, 41 or 42, and already is known to have brain issues because of the past concussions. So he needs to work very smart. And Okada, because he's been a workhorse for New Japan for, Jesus, like 7 or 8 years now. Yeah, his body, I mean, he's not even 40 yet, and he's already got a lot of wear and tear on his body. But both of these guys are so good at what they do, I guarantee you they're going to pull out something impressive. So
That's something to look forward to then, because I remember hearing when the video was released, for the open, like for the challenge or for the initial kickoff to the whole thing. I remember hearing about that in the news. But going back to your point of the difference between AEW and WWE and their pay-per-view schedules, I remember when WWE only had 3, 4, maybe 5 pay-per-views, and they felt like a bigger event. And I kind of wish they would go back to that instead, because I still see the advertisements every now and then for the pay-per-views, and because of the way it's scheduled, there's like 12 or 13 pay-per-views in a year.
Even more than that, because they're 12 regular pay-per-views plus NXT, and plus, I'm not sure if the Saudi Arabia shows are extra or not. But yeah, no matter how you slice it, it's too much. It's just too fucking much.
No, they've definitely oversaturated themselves, and they should definitely pull back. I mean, the Saudi Arabia shows I've heard are big paydays for certain individuals. So if you're willing to travel out there and you're not of a certain background or a gender, you can get on the card no problem without any restriction. But I wish, kind of like AEW, I really wish I was watching AEW more, is really what it comes down to, because it's exactly what I've always wanted, and that was an alternative to WWE that really, mixes it up a little bit and gives other performers a chance. Because let's face it, a guy like Cody Rhodes was relegated to mid-card status for WWE for the longest time. And it wasn't until AEW was he really able to step out of that shadow, in the shadow of his family, more specifically, and able to shine. That now when he goes back to WWE, he's more of a main event player. But even then, it's like, the one thing I don't want it to see continue is the ideal of former WWE stars getting snatched up by other companies just so they can bring them out. I mean, granted, everybody needs a paycheck and everybody needs to work. It goes back to the whole thing we talked about with Vince McMahon. What do you do when you're out of work and you have nothing else to do? Like, this is all they know.
Exactly.
So they have to continue on some route somewhere. But for AEW, all the stuff that I have been listening to and the few things that I have watched, like, I was waiting for the longest time for the return of CM Punk. And I really hoping it was going to be for WWE. Didn't pan out that way. But then he had whatever trouble he had backstage with some of the other wrestlers. But again, is he coming back, or is he?
He's coming back.
So I should probably jump back on there.
So effectively, what I've gathered as to what they're doing, and I'm a little bit behind right now because work has been extra hectic for me, is so they launched an additional. They're going to have effectively 2 touring companies. One of them is going to be like the Young Bucks and a lot of the guys who can't stand Punk, and the other one is going to be Punk and all the guys are going to be Punk and the guys they like. So like it'll be like it's going to be Punk with the main bunch that sticks out to me are FTR, formerly the Revival, in the WWE, which it's really, at this point, it makes a ton of sense because, I mean, that was the problem. It wasn't the problem with Tony Khan. It was, I mean, did you hear what happened in September after the one scrum, after the one pay-per-view?
Again, I heard a few things as far as like the backstage commotion. Somebody bit somebody. I mean, nothing was too outlandish from what I heard, but I know there was a lot of heated words exchanged back and forth, apparently.
The best part of it, and the part that absolutely tickles me so much, is a man named Ace, while holding a dog named Larry. The man named Ace bit another man.
Oh, boy.
So, and also, yeah, whatchamacallit, and yeah, because the Young Bucks apparently, I don't think they did it intentionally, but when they kicked in the door to CM Punk's locker room to go confront him over comments he made about people in the locker room being stupid children, yeah, they accidentally hit his dog. And yeah, for that, I was like, yeah, I can totally understand fucking throwing a punch or two over that. And let's be honest here, and I'll be the first to admit, I have a lot of problems with the Young Bucks. I think they're fucking assholes. They were shitty to people I know when they were still on the independents. So, and I think they just come off as such smarmy little shitheads.
Would you say that they bought into their own hype?
I think they sold an image, and that's what they're still on, and some people like that image. I personally don't.
Okay.
They're like, oh, we're breaking all the rules and we're just making stuff up that we want. And yeah, they've just like their entire style of wrestling. It's not for me. I know some people enjoy it. I do not. I know some people like their kind of personalities of how they're like kind of like in your face and over the top. I find them kind of annoying. I've heard interviews with them and I think they're irritating. I just generally don't care for them on all fronts, and I know, and a lot of that just simply has to do with the fact that they were, like I said, they were shitty to somebody I'm friends with, like way back when they worked for Chikara back in like 2012, 2013.
I think you've mentioned this before. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't want to go into too much detail because it's not quite my story to tell. But yeah, suffice to say, one of the nicest people I know, they were fucking rude too. So,
well,
and that's all it takes in my eyes.
I mean, look, the locker room is a breeding ground for egos, and if you've got the talent to back it up, I mean, there's not much anybody can do to stop you at that point.
And if you think about it, I kind of get it. I mean, I think to be successful in pro wrestling, you have to have at least a bit of an ego.
This all goes back to what we were talking about last time, and that what does it take to make somebody, a master at their art, or a top tier performer. Same thing would happen with professional wrestlers, to be able to have that physical ability to go out there and just leave it all in the ring. There has to be something off in the upstairs area. So yeah, it's unfortunate, but that's really what it comes down to. And some of these guys, and again, it also comes down to something that I've learned in the world of professional wrestling, is that the guys that you think are going to be cool are usually end up being the assholes, and the guys that you think are assholes are usually the guys who end up being really cool. It's unfortunate, but it works that way. Like you would think that New Jack would be a terrifying individual, but like again, the times that I did have interactions with him and meet with him, hell, I even interviewed him one time. He's a nice guy. I was surprised. Some of the guys that I wanted to interview and wanted to sit down with were just flat out assholes. I'm like, oh wow, I thought you would have been a little bit nicer than that. Okay, but I don't want to name any names because I'm sure they had their reasons, but it's whatever the case. Two of them that I will mention, not that they were assholes, but I could definitely see where they were coming from. Tommy Dreamer, even though we've hung out with Tommy Dreamer in the locker room, not like I expect him to remember who I was at all, but we've had a few interactions in the locker room. And the one time I actually went to go interview him, he said, nah, I'm really not doing those right now. I was like, okay. And when he gave me the explanation, he goes, look, people take certain things you say, you clip this out, use that. I'm like, no. I explained to him, like, anything that we talk about is fully under your control. If you want me to clip something out, if you want me to, cut apart, whatever the case is, you tell me and I'll use whatever you will allow me to use. He goes, I appreciate that, but I think I'm going to hold off. I'm like, okay, cool. And it could have been that we were just, a smaller name as far as like an interview outlet. So I completely understood that one. And then the other one was Austin Aries. I think he was carrying around the X Division title at the time.
Yeah.
And I went up to him at one of the conventions, and we had the green room to interview people, so it was not like I was doing it on the floor. And I asked him for an interview, and he just pretty much just shut me down immediately. Didn't give me a reason, didn't give me an excuse, just like, nope, not happening.
That one doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all from a lot of the stories I've heard about that guy and what I've seen of him in the last 5 to 7 years. So
yeah,
not surprised.
That one's going back like, oh god, like over 5, more probably more than 8 years ago. So don't hold anything against them at all. I think the only one that really annoyed me, and fuck it, I'll say it, the Bella Twins. Tried getting an interview because they had time, they were in the green room, they were hanging out, they were talking to the people, and I get it, you want to like chit chat and catch up with everybody, but they like just like lounged around essentially the green room. Like they had more than enough time to give me like a 5 or 10 minute just quick chat, but they were like, nope. They just shut me down completely. Like, oh, okay. At least the boys, quote unquote, would talk or sit down. I mean, hell, I sat down with fucking Vince Russo.
I forgot about that.
Who the fuck am I compared to Vince Russo? Even like, it doesn't matter what your opinion of Vince Russo is. He's done something in the business. He has made his mark, for better or worse. But when I explained to him who I was and explained to him, like, we knew the guy who was running the convention, he goes, yeah, sure. Sat down. I'm like, oh, fuck. I did not prepare for this one. But, No, we were fortunate to get a few guys to sit down. I wish we could have gotten more in the past. But you never know. We'll see what happens.
I think the one that always stuck out in my mind was from, I think this was when we went to New York Comic Con in either 2013 or 2014, and you got to talk to Mick Foley.
Mm-hmm.
And God, what a nice man.
See, that one, thankfully, that was when he was promoting his Santa Claus documentary that he did. Yeah, he was out there, was having fun, and that was right around the same time that he was saying he was improving from all the damage his head has taken. He was doing supplements or whatever else and therapies and treatments. But he was promoting his movie, and then he was also doing his comedy tour. Because I remember you and I went out to the show. I think what was it, like the following week?
Something like that. Let's not name the club because my God, the club sucks and the owner sucks. So let's not give them any press because they haven't paid for nothing.
Yeah, fair enough. But no, yeah, you're completely correct. Like, he was willing to sit down and talk. Like, he knew he was going to get a lot of wrestling questions, even though he was there for other purposes. But even we were very respectful to him because we had the interview, which was probably one of my favorite ones. And at the very, very end, I got one wrestling question in, and I don't think it was even on the actual tape. We didn't actually record that part of the interview. It was just at the very end. Just curious what you thought about this. And I don't remember off the top of my head what it was, but
it was his recollections of In Your House Mind Games in September 1996 in the title match against Shawn Michaels.
I knew the Shawn Michaels part, but fuck you. You pulled that one right off the top of your head. Way to go. Yeah, and he was willing to talk about it very briefly. I mean, he had other appointments, other interviews, whatever the case was. But yeah, dude, he was super nice. Trying to remember who else was really nice. Kane, Glenn Jacobs, was very nice when they were reporting, when they were promoting See No Evil 2. And
when they did the table setups. Yeah, I regret. That's one thing I regret not seeing with you.
Yeah, they were there with the Soska sisters, who are also a delight to meet and to get to talk to. So you can just like feel the energy of them, not just being like fans of the genre and of filmmaking, but like being able to work with Kane. Like they made it work, and it was very, very cool. So yeah, it's interesting what you'll find out when you meet them in person. The Iron Sheik, who recently passed away, for as loud and as boisterous as he can be, like when he was calm and chill, you could talk to him. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the one time I tried to get an interview and his fucking handler fucking cockblocked me.
Well, sadly, I've heard basically his handlers were left a lot to be desired in their quality as people. So,
very much so. Really, what it comes down to is they know who they have, and they were just like trying to make money off of whatever situation they could anytime. And it annoyed the fuck out of me because I just wanted just like a little souvenir. Like, I rarely ask for this kind of thing ever. And this is like going back almost like 10 years at this point. But I figured, just ask for something just for the hell of it, just put it away. And the guy came up to me and was like, $20. And I'm like, what? It's $20. I'm like, all right, first off, you're not Virgil. Secondly, I've been to the locker room with this guy plenty of times. We've talked to one another. Like, I don't expect him to remember me, but at the very least, he knows that I'm one of the boys. Mm-hmm. What the fuck? So I was like, I just walked away from it. Like, all right, never mind, dude. I'm comfortable just being in the locker room, having fun, hanging out with the guys. I don't need this nonsense.
And I've heard like when he gets going, if it's just like when he's like chill and not like all riled up, yeah, it's like, there's going to be beers and he's going to tell you some cool stories, not just about like, working around the wrestling business, but also going back to being a top tier amateur wrestler in Iran back in the 60s and 70s. So yeah, I mean, goddamn, the guy was a fucking, people forget, like, because he kind of became, I don't want to say a joke, but he kind of became like, oh, what crazy thing is Iron Sheik going to say today on the Howard Stern show or in a shoot interview? But
exactly,
he was a bad motherfucker in his day. So
he definitely became a caricature of himself later in life, and that's unfortunately just the way it was portrayed. But there was one event that I was invited out to for the Guardian Angels in New York. They were doing like this event for their junior Guardian Angels,
Okay.
like some type of like recognition ceremony. I don't remember the guy's full name, but he went by Master Flex. He was one of the karate instructors or martial arts instructors. Came out to a lot of the shows, brought his group out on the bus. Always, wanted to shake the hands with all the performers and everything else. Got really nice with me. I don't know why. And out of nowhere, invited me out to New York for an award ceremony where I was able to receive an award in recognition for the Junior Guardian Angels. And I was like, this is okay, sure, why not? Out there, it was funny because my gimmick being Native American at the time, everybody thought I was Tatanka.
Oh.
And I had this odd feeling where like, no, I'm not that guy. And like, oh, then like, who are you? And I'm like, fuck, what do I say? I think like one or two people I said yes to because they didn't know what the fuck was going on. Other people I was like, no, I'm related to him or whatever the kid. Like I just played up the gimmick for whatever it was worth at the time.
Okay, baby.
Oh fuck, I was so uncomfortable. And here I am sitting with Sal Sincere was at the event as well, and former
Nice.
WWE guy. And I remember specifically for him, it was Sal Sincere. Well, Sal was there, I was there, and then the Sheik was there. And of course, who was getting all the attention? The Sheik.
Sheik.
Also,
yeah.
and also Patriot. But it was funny because as I'm talking to Sal, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is gonna be great. We're gonna hang out here." This was like a Sunday night. Like we're gonna hang out for the award ceremony. Then we're gonna get a hotel together, and then we're going to Stern tomorrow morning. I was like, "Oh shit, really?" He goes, "Yeah, I can't wait, man. We're gonna fucking get Sheiky Baby all riled up. We're gonna start talking about shit in the green room and just unleash him on air." And sure enough, that's what happened. They just kept talking shit in the green room. And by the time he went on air for Howard Stern, he was just a ball of fire. And again, like that's something I wasn't there for the Stern portion of it, but to hear like all the shit that they were talking backstage, I was like, oh man, just to see him get riled up. And when he got like, it was amusing as hell to see him when he did get worked up. And at that point, you just like sat back and just enjoyed it because it's like when somebody gets on the microphone in the world of professional wrestling, like you just wait for something cool to happen. And Sheik at that point was just fucking very loud and very, very blunt. But yeah, it was, oh man, that's, God, I'm trying to remember what year that was. Fuck. That was such a weird thing to say, like, oh, come to New York. Why? We're going to give you an award. For what? And apparently I was just being a nice guy to him. So I was like, okay, sure, I'll go. It was really cool whenever he brought the kids around. Just the different shows, and everybody got to have a good time. So it's funny when I look back on what I've done in the indies. Again, I'm a nobody when it comes to the world of professional wrestling. But the fact that I do have any kind of stories always makes you go, oh shit, I did that, and I had fun with this, and I met that person. Okay, yeah, there was some time had there, but it just, it doesn't feel like it was me. It feels like it was a different person entirely going through that shit.
Well, I mean, that was a while ago.
So odd. What were the podcasts you were talking before again that your friends were doing?
So my friends, Duge and Brett, they do a podcast called We Need Wrestling. It's good. It's about broken up. A little bit of WWE stuff. Neither of them are really big fans of what WWE's up to now, but they'll focus a lot on AEW, and they focus a lot on whatever's going on for the week with New Japan Pro Wrestling. If All Japan's got anything of interest going on, they'll check in with Noah, Pro Wrestling Noah, periodically. And they also spend a lot of time looking at Stardom, which is a up-and-coming Joshi promotion. So it's all female Japanese wrestlers. And let me tell you, they hit hard. They fucking hit hard.
Yes, they do.
So they'll do a lot of that stuff. The other one I mentioned is At Odds with Wrestling. That is my friend Joe Sposto. If you watched any indie wrestling around Pennsylvania, New Jersey, around the way, specifically Chikara, you may have known him as Leonard F. Chikarison, or you may have heard him doing commentary for other shows. He does that with his friend Adam. That one, they do some history. They talk about whatever happened with the week in wrestling. If you really want to get deep into it, they do Patreons where they review different stuff. And yeah, all kinds of good stuff going on over there.
No, for shit.
These are both on the soon to be named network, which is also where you can find my other podcast,
Ooh, there we
uh,
go.
which which is my other podcast is called Wings on Wings, where myself and my friends Duge and Brett from We Need Wrestling and our other friend Michelle, we sit down, we watch an episode of the 90s sitcom Wings, and then we each eat wings, and each week we feature a different hot sauce, and we review the episode and review the hot sauce. And if anybody's interested, here's a bit of a spoiler for our next upcoming episode. The Steve-O hot sauce, that shit is no joke.
Was this like an early taste test, or was this during the episode that you found it out?
No, it's ideally what we do is we get the hot sauces and we don't try them beforehand. So we go in cold, so we don't know what we're dealing with. And so, I mean, you can, by reading the bottle, you can usually get a good idea. It's like, okay, is this going to be like a real ass kicker, or is this just going to be like some heat, or is this one going to be pretty mellow? But that's kind of the joke of the show is us trying to review this shitty mediocre sitcom that has not aged well while our fucking mouths are on fire.
Oh wow!
So it just ends up with us like cursing and yelling and breathing heavily as we're just drinking water and milk trying to negate the pain. But we don't always do like sauces that kick our asses. It's just we just look for the weirdest stuff we could find. So, but it's we're almost done with season 5. Thank fuck. Now we have season 6 and season 7 to go. So I think we've got about a year left if we keep up at the pace we've been going.
I didn't realize that Wings made it all the way to season 7.
It's like 170, 180 episodes. It started in 1990. It ran until 1997. How wild is that?
I remember catching like reruns of it every now and then, but I just never realized like it had run that long. That's crazy.
Well, that was the funny thing with the show. It was that was one of those ones that got syndicated heavily into the early 2000s. So hopefully everybody made some extra cash on that one. So, but yeah, pretty wild stuff.
So all right, I have to ask, why Wings on Wings?
What do you mean? Like, why are we doing it?
No, I understand you in particular. I understand you have a love for hot sauce. Well, I love the wordplay as far as Wings on Wings. The title is very fitting, but why Wings? Why the show Wings?
Well, this all started as a joke sometime in October of 2019, as I recall. We were sitting around just making jokes of terrible ideas for podcasts. And yeah, I think my friend Michelle just mentioned it's like, oh, Wings on Wings. You watch an episode of Wings and then you eat wings. And we're all like, oh, what a stupid fucking idea. Fast forward about 4 months to January of 2020, and it's like, you guys want to get together and record a couple episodes and see if this works? And we're like, okay. So we did it. We recorded the first 10 or 15 episodes. Then we shut the podcast down because of the pandemic. Since that is one show that you can't do that one over Skype or anything like that. So you really have to be in the same room. So we shut the podcast down for about a year or so. Then we picked it up in like mid to late March of 2021. We actually celebrated the return of the show as we all sat down with the Pocky One Chip Challenge. And we just ate pieces of the chip and died on air for a few minutes because fuck, those things are nasty. And we've been rolling with it ever since then. Like, we've got people coming on the show. We've gotten an unofficial 5th member of the show. Well, she's pretty official now. She's a hairdresser who really liked the show, and now she hangs out and does it with us because she's funny and weird like the rest of us.
Oh, that's cool.
And yeah, and with any due luck, we'll have a couple of surprises coming up for the end because we're already starting to think ahead to the end of the show since I think we counted it out, and I think we've got like 53 or 54 episodes of the show left. So yeah, we're moving. Thank fuck.
All right, cool, man. I think that that does it for this week. Is there any other? I mean, besides the podcast, are there any other things you want to mention, or?
I'll just give a plug. Like, if you're interested in some podcasts, go check out the soon-to-be named network. There's wrestling podcasts like the aforementioned We Need Wrestling and At Odds with Wrestling. There's also Final Wrestling Plays. If you want to hear podcast or comic book stuff, there's a good comic book podcast called Long Box Heroes. And that's pretty much it for the time being. I'm not sure what's active and not active right now because I've only been listening to very few podcasts these days. But yeah, go check it out if you're looking for some shit to listen to. I can vouch for all the people on there. I know them all. They're all friends of mine.
That's very cool, man. I think you gave me something to listen to over the weekend.
Rock on.
All right, well, that does it for this week. I hope everybody enjoyed, and I guess we'll catch you in the next one. My name is Eric Hernandez. What's your name?
That's not important.
No, okay, fair enough. We're doing that again. Thank you for listening. We are the Rabblecast.